Thank you for having me. So you will notice that I will be kind of using the script here, and that's because I just recently finished writing this thing. And I don't know about your memories and stuff. I have actually a very good memory, and as I get older, I have more to remember. But yeah, because this is new, I'm still kind of working with the script, but hopefully you'll still find it entertaining. I wrote this kind of around, like I like to think of myself as being fairly youthful, but then being youthful and being 65 or qualifying for Medicare, it seems like an oxymoron, you know what I mean? And I never pictured myself, say, you know, being, I'm actually 66 at this point, and I'm like, how did this happen? And so that's the idea of the expiration date, is just acknowledging and kind of dealing with that idea that unless I live to be 130 or something, I am probably not really middle-aged anymore, you know what I mean? So anyways, okay. Melanoma doesn't crawl, it jumps. The dermatologist from the pigmented lesion clinic at Mass General Hospital told me 2 days ago when he called to deliver my biopsy results. When he called, not a nurse, not an aide. A bad sign, I knew instinctively. Even though his tone was pleasant, clearly designed not to alarm his patient, since after 20 years of visits to his clinic, he knows me. Now, 2 days later, I'm in an examination room with Dr. T, the same oncology surgeon who operated on me 15 years earlier during my first brush with melanoma. The doctor doesn't remember me, but I'm not surprised. I mean, mine was one of thousands of procedures he's performed in his 25 or 30-year career, an assembly line of spots, moles, disease cells, problems to be solved or not. Still, I remember him and his parting line when I left another exam room with him 2 weeks after he removed that first melanoma, a small dot on my chest. "I'm pretty sure I'll see you again," he said at the time. Now, this was not what I wanted to hear in my euphoria after getting a brief taste of being a cancer patient, and then after 2 weeks, being released back to my own recognizance. The only follow-up I needed back then was my biannual visit to the clinic at Mass General, where I'd been going once a year anyway, ever since I was told I was at high risk of skin cancer. Well, this time around, the spot is larger, hence the 10% chance of spread. Small enough to be considered stage 1, but large enough to warrant a look at my lymph nodes. So in addition to a wide excision on the back of my left triceps, the surgeon recommends a biopsy of something he calls the sentinel nodes under my left armpit, the closest and most likely place the melanoma would spread. The term echoes in my brain. I mean, sentinels are my first line of defense, like the soldiers on the Maginot Line. But what if they, like the French army in 1940, were complacent, distracted, falling down on the job? Meanwhile, I scan the freckled cafe au lait birthmark that runs from the crook of my left arm to the center of my chest. A road map of moles and spots, a fifth column festering in my own body. I mean, sentinels should be aware, protective, proactive. I picture them lined up and ready to fight. But as I read on the internet, they're more like scouts, signposts, conveyors of good or bad news. A not so early warning system, letting the doctors know if my cancer has spread or is about to. The worst case scenario would lead to more scans, tests, immunotherapy drugs. The uncertainty of having active cancer, of life in the unknown. 10 days later, I'm headed into surgery. I've dreaded this day of giving up control and going under general anesthesia, of having my smooth but freckled arm sliced like an apple. I have an irrational fear of not waking up, of doctors, nurses, figures in masks circling my body while a monitor beeps out a siren, a warning, an alarm. Beyond that, there are thoughts and feelings that I'd rather not think about, like I'm an agnostic and don't have faith in this all-powerful God, the compassionate master who will expel my cancer and save me. The nurses, hidden behind their masks, are unfailingly nice. They speak in warm tones and ask me to confirm my name, my date of birth, and why I'm having surgery. Then I'm wheeled in my hospital bed from Mass General's weighing building that's pre-op for day surgery, through narrow hallways and into the bowels of the Lunder building, the hospital's new cancer center, where my late brother, diagnosed with a rare and deadly form of liver cancer, was a patient 4 years earlier, the year before he died. Seeing Lunder in stark black letters brings me back to his time there as if it was last year or even last month. Well, now I am the cancer patient, rolling in and out of an elevator and parked in another cubicle closer to the OR. 2 new nurses introduce themselves and tell me that they'll take care of me. I'm choked up by memory. You see, it never occurred to me that I would be in this building, which didn't exist when I had my first melanoma. I forget the nurses' names, but manage to explain why I'm upset. They're sorry about my loss, and there I am in my crib bed, a 64-year-old boy, laid bare. The anesthesiologist, a young woman of about 30, introduces herself, preps me for the IV, and explains the risks of surgery. Small things like swelling and discomfort, major issues like numbness in the limbs, and very rarely a slight risk of death, which, she whispers, is unlikely. Then she stabs me gently, searches for an opening, digging around but not finding a vein. I'm not squeamish around needles, but now I'm feeling it. So she withdraws, tapes me up, and tries again. Well, this time she strikes gold or blood. And I'm waiting, suspended in time, because the OR isn't quite ready. Eventually, she offers me something to take the edge off, and sensing my anxiety, murmurs, "Take the drugs." 3 hours later, I gradually come to, surfacing from a deep dive. My left arm numb, my triceps covered in gauze with spots of blood leaking through, and more gauze under my armpit. Soon after, I'm dressed and guided by a male nurse to the front entrance of the hospital where a friend picks me up. I mean, I'm wrung out, but relieved, almost euphoric to have the whole thing over with, but not quite. For the next week, I putter around my apartment, circling back to my queen-size bed, which draws me like a magnet. I'm achy and drained, have little use of my left arm, and keep it as still as possible. After 4 or 5 days, my 6-inch long incision on my arm is healing, more like a worm than a snake, but still tender. But the numbness under my arm is fading, replaced by shooting pain, nerve pain, the nurse calls it, a probe deep inside. Now, I have a follow-up in the next week, 2 weeks after the surgery. In the meantime, I try not to think about the 10% of how I'll handle stage 3 cancer and whatever comes with it. I called the nurse to discuss my ongoing swelling and when I could get my results. I'm looking at your report now. It's all good. We got a clear margin on your arm, and there was no cancer in the lymph nodes. The pain doesn't disappear, but it lightens as I thank her for the news and silently thank the God I don't quite believe in for whatever good luck karma just came my way. Still, you have to be vigilant, the surgeon tells me when I go for my follow-up the next week. There are no guarantees here. You see, I come from a family of faulty genes, not known for its longevity. I'm pushing the envelope, stretching the elastic. I have sleep apnea, mild to moderate heart disease, and now I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. I ditch and dodge, sweave and whirve, determined to make the most of the time I have left, which after melanoma and making it to 65 seems more improbable with each passing year. You see, my last name, Leblang, or Leblang in German, means live long. My name is a talisman, a blessing, a curse, a constant reminder of the hopes and dreams of my ancestors. It's an imperative, a command in German, live long. Or maybe a wish, historically unfulfilled. Now I carry their name, breaking through that glass ceiling, but knowing that the bottom could drop out at any moment. I come from a family in which the men are not long-lived, but kick off early, which seems like a karmic joke, a reminder that God, if he, she, they exists, has a sick sense of humor. When I was 14, my father, a strapping 44-year-old, 6'2", broad-shouldered engineer with a booming voice and bone-cracking walk, suffered a massive heart attack while playing tennis. We don't know if he's going to make it, the young surgeon told my mother at the Mount Sinai Hospital emergency room on that Sunday afternoon in 1971. My dad survived but had a second fatal heart attack when he was just 61 and I was 30. Then when I was 18, my only Uncle Jerry died of a heart attack, also at 44. 2 months later, his father, my grandfather, who we called Papa Ben, died of something called an aortic aneurysm, or as I thought of it later, a rupture of the heart. And so by 18, 14, or even 5 and a half, I figured out that life was dangerous and nobody gets out alive. Today, I feel Father Time, his fetid breath on my neck, have felt his breath since childhood. I mean, when you or I die, we'll lose it all, our ego, personality, sense of self. Still, before I go, I want to figure out what it means, why I'm here, if I'll leave anything or anyone behind. Now, they say that youth is wasted on the young. They're feckless, reckless, think they're immortal, but I never did. And here's why. I'm 5, and I just got hit by a car. Or, to be more accurate, I hit the car. You see, when I ran onto Silsby Road, bolted into the street, there was no way for the driver, some nameless man who stopped, I'm told, all shook up, to be ready for a body to hit his car. How could he know what or who was coming? Let's back up. It's the first day of kindergarten, and I've gone with my mom to Canterbury Elementary in University Heights, a suburb of Cleveland, to meet my teacher, Mrs. Ullman, with her cat's eye glasses, prune face, and sour expression. I meet my classmates surrounded by their mothers, and then I'm off to Scott's Five and Dime at Cedar Center, where my mom buys me a plastic whistle. After that, we take a bus home because my mother just had a temporary permit and wasn't driving without my dad. Well, since my mom was busy with the baby, my year-old brother Russell, the plan was for me to walk half a mile back from school by myself. Then, since there was no traffic light or crosswalk on our street, and our house was on the far side of that street, I would toot my whistle, and my mom would come out and help me cross. That was the plan. Now, years later, my shrink would say that though my mom meant well, the first day of school is a stressful time for a kid, and putting the plan into motion on that day was probably, maybe, most definitely not the best idea. Still, I was the one who ran out, who broke the rules, who didn't listen or who listened, and who freaked out anyway. It's mid-afternoon on a sunny September day. I stand across a chasm. The sound of a lawnmower on a postage stamp lawn behind me, the whoosh of traffic in front. The closing of our screen door and the wooden door behind it as my mom disappears inside our house across the street. The whistle weightless in my right hand. Do I blow it? Or do I just run? A car, a Pontiac, a green Pontiac, the kind with fins, passes in front of me, and then nothing. Darkness, silence. My first experience of death or something close to it. Years later, my mother tells me that I was never unconscious after the accident. Instead, I was half in and half out, though I have no memory. As she shot out the front door, as the ambulance raced to Suburban Hospital on that sunny day in September 1962. Sometime later, I wake up in a crib-like bed, my left leg raised, hip shattered in something called traction. My bed in the children's ward, a long white room with 2 rows of facing beds encased in whiteness, where I will spend the next 6 weeks immobile. A concussion, a damaged hip, but no pain, just time passing slowly, heavily, as I wait for my father to stop by after work to bring me Lance butter cookies and Pez candies from the hospital gift shop downstairs. It's here in this hospital ward that I have my first crush, my first real sense that I am different and not in a good way. You see, there's a boy here named Roger who has something called walking pneumonia, which enables him to bounce around and do basically anything he wants short of going home. Like me, he's 5. And there's something about this boy that stirs my desire. It's the same feeling I get when I watch these old Tarzan movies that come onto the black and white TV, which sits in one corner of the ward. Johnny Weissmuller swinging from tree to tree on a Saturday afternoon. Roger and I have hours, days, weeks to kill, and we pass them by playing a game in which he is Tarzan and I, by process of elimination and the fact I can't get out of bed, am Jane. Thus begins a long line of secret crushes, unrequited love, of boys and later unavailable men, a direct line to what comes later, to my 60s and single status. Of course, I didn't know how things would turn out back then. I mean, I had enough to deal with in 1962. I missed the first 2 months of school and come back after Halloween with a limp, a souvenir of the accident. I have another fear of getting lost, of not being able to find my way back home. That search for home, a safe space to fit in, to find my place, will haunt me for years, decades, until right now, until this very moment. But that wasn't the only reminder of my mortality. You see, at 10, I sliced my left arm on the lid of our aquarium while reaching to turn a light on in our family room. My parents were in the living room talking to a family friend, a space reserved for company. I walked in holding my shredded arm, trying not to bleed on my mother's royal blue carpet. A flap of skin 8 inches long, and my father's face goes from white to gray as he runs to the kitchen to grab a dish towel and make a makeshift tourniquet. My mother calls the doctor, and the family friend runs out to start the car. That gash caused by the razor-sharp edge of the aquarium's lid leads to 50 stitches at the local ER, and then the next year, surgery to slice off something called keloids, so that it looked like I had this growth, a worm crawling up my forearm. I carry that scar to this day, and sometimes I forget it's there, noticing it again, which stirs up old memories like sediment on the ocean floor. And it left me a Pisces who loved to swim with a fear of deep water. Now, I'm not 5, but 35, and death, or my fear of it, is a constant companion, like a house guest who just won't leave. Heart pounding, mouth dry, I kneel in the middle of a huge chapel with white beams, vaulted ceiling, and beige carpeting. Rows of men and women, young, old, middle age, writhed on blankets, lost in dreams of fear, hope, regret. So I'm watching over my partner, Pierrette, a French-Canadian stewardess. My job is to whisper encouragement. Just breathe, you're doing great. As the other 40 coaches are doing for their partners. We're all spread out in the room here. This is my introduction to something called holotropic breathing, or rebirthing, a special kind of breath work designed to blast through emotional blocks and to bring us back into our bodies. But I'm not sure I want to go there, to be back in this particular body, which has been holding a huge reservoir of shit ever since childhood. Now, my partner Pierrette doesn't make much noise, but some of the others do, screaming, crying, moaning. A heavy-set man on a blanket behind me whimpers, "Oh no!" A woman cackles. I try not to look at their bodies, since many of them are suffering from something called tetany, a temporary paralysis of the arms, legs, and face. Well, during our introduction to this strange exercise, the workshop leader warns us of possible side effects like paralysis, nausea, a desire to stop breathing for periods of time. Waiting in this cavernous chamber with its vaulted ceiling and mosaic tablets, figures of Lakshmi, Shiva, and pictures of the guru, my mind whirs, clicks, and spins. Circling well-worn paths in my brain, a litany loud and clear. I'm not meant to do this. I mean, I'll stop breathing. I could have a heart attack like my dad. What if I die? I mean, I run several times a week, I lift weights, and try to outrun my fate. But my doctor says my blood pressure is something called labile, soaring to dangerous heights when paired with my fear of physicians or anything else. Now, my dad had the same physiology, the same untreated blood pressure until his first heart attack. It could only be a matter of time, a few months, a few years, until I end up like him. Every doctor visit, every time I see a blood pressure cuff, I know my father's destiny will be my own. I mean, rebirthing might just send me over the edge. The dreamers moan, weak, and shriek. Finally, they go quiet and the room is silent. Soon they will sit up and it will be my turn to fly. Now, rebirthing is the culminating activity for a week-long workshop called The Quest for the Limitless You, which took place at a place called Kripalu, the Center for Yoga, in the summer of '91. In my case, I called it The Quest for the Limitless Jew. Now, I'd signed up for the seminar a few weeks earlier looking for a quiet escape from my life in Boston, a break in my routine on the recommendation of my acupuncturist, Deborah. Now, she had never visited Kripalu, but some of her clients had said it was a cool New Age resort, a great place to relax. Well, during the first few days, I agreed. I mean, though I was put off by the beatific photos of the guru, who was wrapped in a gold dhoti, his hands clasped in gratitude, the place was beautiful. I mean, looking out over the Berkshire Hills and a scenic lake. Well, now I want to run. I mean, I walk over to one of the volunteers, a frizzy, red-haired resident, and tell her that I am freaking out. Another participant in the workshop, a doctor, says that rebirthing is medically safe. It's just a form of controlled hyperventilation, but I am definitely not in control. Now, the theory, as our teacher explained it, is that by taking in more air than we need, we liberate old patterns of emotional holding. This causes energy to surge through our bodies, breaking through old blocks and freeing our minds in a way much more powerful than talk therapy. Well, I tried everything else: psychiatrists, talk therapy, acupuncture, medications, from Prozac, which caused my anxiety level to take off like the Concorde, to lithium, which did nothing for me. I've had panic attacks, heart palpitations, dry mouth. Rebirthing might trigger another one. But I lie down anyway. Death is preferable to life with this much fear. I close my eyes as orchestral music surges through the room. There's a technique, a special breath, in through the mouth, out, in, out, like more energy, more air, and I feel panic rising in my chest, fluttering, electric, tingling, and I'm on a roller coaster like the one at Six Flags, and I am going down, down, down. Just breathe, you're doing great, Pierrette says in her French-Canadian accent. And I surge in, surge out, my tongue is thick, I'm gulping air, my arms and legs are electric, my hands are claws, my mouth is dry as dust. The music rises, dips, cymbals crash, and drums roll. After 10 minutes or 20, it seems that I will not die. I lick my lips and rest, my heart rate slowing, my breathing stopped for 30 seconds at a time. Panic rises again in my chest. You see, not breathing feels like death. Another wave of fear, and then I feel light, almost euphoric. In this moment, my heart starts to soften and I feel calmer. The room grows quiet. We're told to come back to our surroundings, to breathe normally. Slowly, very slowly, I open my eyes and sit up, reborn. Looking around, I see the others feel it too. I mean, everybody looks younger, more innocent, distilled to their essence. I know now that I have to come back to this place, that I need to. My fear of dying, of losing control, doesn't disappear, but it feels lighter in this moment. As I walk out of the chapel, I hold out more hope for the future, wherever I end up. I'm back at the yoga center, sitting in a group at orientation in the hills of Western Massachusetts. A year ago, I had no idea what an ashram was. And what am I, a nice Jewish boy from a good middle-class family with 2 college degrees, doing in this place where the residents wear white robes, chant in Sanskrit, and bow down to a picture of an Indian guru when the actual dude is out traveling around the world or hanging out at his house up the road? Now, we're in a program called Spiritual Lifestyle Training, which means we'll live with a group of 300 long-term residents for 3 months, serve the thousands of guests who stream through the ashram looking for enlightenment, relaxation, and good vegetarian food, and learn yoga and other practices based on Hindu traditions, watered down for Americans, sort of like Reform Hinduism in the hills of Western Mass. Now, there are 20 of us in my group, ranging in age from 18 to 60, and I've just come out during one of our sessions. See, I know there are other gay folks at the ashram, and we're supposed to remain celibate during our time there anyway, but Kripalu is all about being real. And so I raise my hand and I say something like, I need to bring my full self here, which is really just ashram speak for, I got to get something off my chest. Now, I naturally wonder how the presumably straight men in my group are going to feel about being with me when we're all sleeping on the floor of the ashram library during orientation. But right after I come out, another man in the group comes out, and then one of the women does too, and it seems like everybody is cool with it. So I spent 3 months at Kripalu, and the next year come back for almost a full year. I'm not there for the guru, who it turns out had had sex with several of his female acolytes and was forced to leave shortly after I left, but just to find some place to call home, a place where I feel I finally belong. Now, being at Kripalu showed me that there are mysteries that I will never understand. I mean, maybe you have a roadmap, a manual for how to live life on this earth, as well as a guide to cosmic freeways and what comes next, but I don't. I'm pragmatic, more obsessed with life in the here and now, and just trying to manage as best I can. But my MO, my modus operandi, is to keep one foot out the door. To wonder if I'm good enough to fit in, and then if and when I do, to wonder what is wrong with them. The ashram, the synagogue, the gay men's retreat, whatever. So at Kripalu, I never became a disciple of the guru, unlike most of the residents, who went through a special initiation, pledged their devotion to Gurudev, the Indian yoga teacher who founded the place, and then were given a special Sanskrit name chosen especially for them. So after I left Kripalu, I bounced here and there searching for something I couldn't quite define. To a Quaker-connected communal house, living with 18 other people on Boston's fancy Beacon Hill, after I saw a flyer for the place at a gay country western dance. Though in my 2 years of living there in the 90s, I never once went to one of their Quaker meetings. To a progressive synagogue called Temple Beth Zion, where I learned all the things I'd forgotten or ignored in my spotty 1970s Hebrew school education, going to synagogue on Friday nights for several years, until the novelty wore off, until I was left only with my doubt. To a mostly gay Unitarian church with a lesbian minister who welcomes folks from all traditions, even semi-agnostic Jews who don't believe in the second coming and doubted the first one, where I sang in the choir, though I can't read music until COVID silenced our voices, which in my case might be a good thing, because though I have great tone in the shower, when I sing in public, I have no fucking idea what I am doing. So, based on this litany, you might think that I am somewhat spiritual, deep, profound. But the truth, and I can only tell you the truth because I'm not good at making things up, is that I simply want to find that place to call home, or to find a home within myself before it's too late, to know that I'm enough, imperfect as I am. The bottom line is, I'm a bad yogi, Quaker, Unitarian. And most of all, I'm a bad Jew. You see, growing up in the heavily Jewish suburb of Beechwood in the Heights east of Cleveland, kind of like Brookline, but more Jewish, a shtetl transplanted to the Midwest, I got points, props, recognition for my red blonde hair and my generic American looks, so that I could pass for a goy, a Gentile. But by the 1960s and 70s, that wasn't really necessary, not in the narrow slice of Midwestern Jewish soil in which I took root. You see, I've spent 60 years struggling, wrestling, trying to outrun my fate, heritage, DNA, trying to figure out what it means to be one of God's chosen people. And frankly, given all the shit we've been chosen for, crusades, pogroms, the Inquisition, and the coup de grace I don't even want to mention, maybe we should have said, no thanks, we'll take a hard pass. But I grew up in a Jewish world where all the characters, the doctor, the lawyer, the tailor, the baker, the hoods at Beechwood High School, were members of my tribe, my dysfunctional family. Now, my slice of that world wasn't observant or religious. I mean, my parents and I went to Fairmount Temple, where I was bar mitzvahed on Yom Kippur, and then came back and had lunch. Skipping breakfast was our modified fast. My formal Jewish education consisted of 5 years of thrice weekly Hebrew school, in which I learned about our patriarchs and matriarchs and the checkered history of our people. And I learned to read Hebrew haltingly so that I could sound out the prayers, which didn't do me much good without the English translation on the facing page. Now, a few weeks after my bar mitzvah, I was called into the office of the chief rabbi for the talk. A rotund, bearded man I'd only seen from a distance as he droned on from the bema during Saturday morning services. Now, sitting before him, he told me it was time to step up, to join the community, to continue my Jewish education. I remember him as curly-haired, fleshy, pompous. I was quiet, shy, a good boy, but there was no way on God's green earth that I was going to spend my Saturday mornings listening to his boring sermons. I may have even told him that I didn't believe in God. Suffice it to say, we didn't part on good terms. And that was the end of my Jewish education for the next 30 years. Now I go to synagogue twice a year on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holidays. There I don a yarmulke, a tallis, and mumble the Hebrew prayers of my ancestors, some of which I know by heart. On Yom Kippur, sometimes I fast, sometimes I don't. Either way, I am skeptical, doubtful, dubious of this all-powerful God. Is he, she, they listening, paying attention to what I am doing or not doing, monitoring my behavior like Mrs. Shermer, my fourth grade teacher? I am antisocial, a member of my own lost tribe. I'm on the outskirts, neither here nor there, not quite believing or disbelieving. But despite it all, I'm still here and still Jewish. But what does that even mean if I'm Jewish without faith in Hashem, the Blessed One, praise be He, what my housemates call Sky Daddy? Where does that leave me? The clock is ticking, and I should really figure this out before it's too late. So I try this and this and this and that. I'm 61, and it's mid-afternoon on a sunny day in September. But I'm inside my apartment, crouching shirtless on the bedroom floor, wondering if I am losing my mind. I'm lightheaded, sweaty, dizzy, moving in slow motion on videotape delay, and I'm alone, wondering how I've gotten myself into this mess. You see, a few hours earlier, I left Arlington Street Unitarian Church, where I sing in the choir on Sunday mornings, and headed out for a walk around Boston's public gardens. Approaching Charles Street, I could see there's some kind of an event taking place on the Common with lots of millennials who looked a lot like the hippies of my youth. Well, I cross the street and I'm at something called the Hemp Fest, a celebration of marijuana in all its forms. The newly legal substance is everywhere. I mean, you could smoke it, eat it, slather yourself in hemp oil. Snaking through the crowd, I'm finding the whole thing a little overwhelming. There's too much jargon and too many folks who seem to know what they're doing. Now, I haven't smoked pot in years. And the only time I smoked regularly was back in the summer of 1977 when I had a teaching internship in San Francisco. One of my roommates worked at City Hall and got his pot from a dealer there. Most evenings we'd smoke weed through Greg's small pipe, attack a box of Wheat Thins, and go on a cable car ride where I would hang out from the running board admiring the city lights. I mean, if that sounds tame, it was. Taking a few hits or puffs was my limit. A pot just made me sleepy and gave me the munchies. Well, I'm out of my element, but I'm not thinking, or at least I'm trying not to. You see, my younger brother had died of a rare and aggressive sarcoma, a tumor in the liver, just 2 months earlier, a year after he was diagnosed. I feel dazed, numb, living in a dream that feels more like a nightmare. I mean, Russell was the healthy one in my family, a marathon runner, disciplined, focused, with a great family and a good diet. He'd done all the right things and died just before his 57th birthday. A gummy could numb me for a few hours, or so I hope. It's clear walking around the festival that marijuana has come a long way. There are new style pipes, inhalers for vaping, THC in all its forms. It's a hot, humid day, and I feel like a visitor in a strange land. Now, several of the merchants are selling edibles, and though I'd heard about marijuana brownies and cookies back in the day, I'd never tried them. So I stop at one of the booths, which features these small cookies in plastic vials. They look kind of like chocolate macaroons. And the sketchy-looking guy behind the counter tells me that I could have a free sample. Well, I take one. He said it has something called CBD, which will relax me but not space me out. Well, I sit around, hang out, and don't feel anything. So I go to another booth, which featured pre-packaged gummies for only $10. Now, the gummies look like candy, and according to the 20-something dude behind the counter, the whole package contains as much THC as maybe 3 or 4 joints. I do the math, not very well as it turns out, and pop one in my mouth. 20 minutes later, feeling nothing but tired, I pop another one. But here's the thing. That popping foreign substances into my body is not me. It's not who I am. I mean, I've never tried ecstasy or K, though I am curious, because it wasn't produced at CVS, because I didn't trust the manufacturer, images of Breaking Bad streaming in my mind, because I have a fear of fentanyl, arsenic, cod liver oil, or whatever they cut the shit with. Well, I'm almost home when the edibles kick in. Evidently, they take time to work, something I hadn't quite figured out until now. As I hug the planks on my bedroom floor, I'm not sure what is real and what isn't. Did I just call my friend Bill, explaining that I'd mixed 2 different types of marijuana, ingested way too much THC, and might need to go to the hospital? Or had I just imagined the whole thing? 1 minute feels like an hour, and I really wonder if I've had a psychotic break. I mean, maybe I'm dead. Could this be that near-death experience I've read about, where the circuits shut down and life is replayed like a film, rewound until there's nothing left? I remember hearing that marijuana could make you paranoid, but now I get it on another level, in my gut, in my solar plexus, and I'm not sure if I'm coming back. I mean, this could be the ultimate bonehead move, death by bad gummy. All the things I haven't done, like fall in love, have mind-blowing sex, overcome my fears of flying, deep water, conflict, will remain undone. What if I'd come out in the summer of 1977 when I lived in San Francisco, if I dated men there instead of trying to date women, instead of waiting till the height of the AIDS epidemic in backwater Columbus, Ohio? What if I'd gone after the objects of my affection in Boston bars in the late 80s, instead of staying lost in the shadows, because it's only now, when I look at pictures of me back then, that I realize I was hot. I call my friend Bill 3 times, not sure if I really called him before or if I just imagined it. He's calm, reasonable, tells me I am not dying, I do not need to go to the ER, I'll be fine. 15 minutes later, he takes me for a short walk around the neighborhood where I lie down on the tree lawn of an apartment building. Sit with him at the ice cream shop and tell him that I might be dead, but then he'd have to be dead, in which case I guess I'm not. He guides me back to my apartment where he finds my gummies, reading the package, sucking in his breath. You've taken a really high dose. Something I've already figured out. Well, after several hours, I start to come back to myself. You see, the Cleveland Browns are on TV, losing another close football game, which means that everything is status quo, or at least normal in my world. By Monday morning, I am no longer high, but I spend the next 2 days in bed recovering from my trip. Well, now looking back on the whole experience, I'm shocked by my naivete. I'm a 60-something man making the rookie mistakes I should have made in my 20s. I wake up that next morning after the gummies, groggy but thankful, and still intact with the gift of time, so precious if I can only figure out how to use it. So I come through the gummies, survive the melanoma and the first year of COVID. I get vaxxed, boosted, and here I am facing 65, coming up against the limits of my known world. And now, today, I'm standing in my 8-foot by 14-foot room, what a friend calls a shipping container. Still, it's a perfect metaphor for my own small life, and I mean, how much do I really need? You see, in the fall of 2021, after my brush with melanoma, I moved back into the Beacon Hill Friends House, that Quaker-connected community in downtown Boston, where I lived for 2 years in the mid-90s. So now I get a new 4-year term, a chance to live with 18 other people, most of whom are half my age or less. Let me give you the grand tour. A full-size bed, a narrow desk and bookcase, a wardrobe in lieu of a closet, and the old trunk, a footlocker, that saw me off to college in 1975, covered with an African blanket which serves as a low altar, with pictures of my friends and family. A window looks out onto Chestnut Street, brick houses, gas lamps, a scene out of Currier and Ives. Filtered light bathes the room in a glow at sunset. Now, the room isn't much, yet it's everything. It's not about my possessions, but the cards, pictures, memories of the people who populate my life. Still here or gone, but not forgotten. You see, living alone in my one-bedroom apartment during that first year of COVID was a masterclass in loneliness. So I came back to this 5-story, 20-room row house to live with a bunch of strangers, since all of my housemates from the 90s were long gone. I mean, community life worked for me in my 30s, but in my 60s, who knows? But after the accidents, the melanoma, the loss of my brother, I knew this, that I want, need, have to be part of something larger than myself, and must quit staring at my own navel. So I'm sitting in this boxy room, living with Quakers, atheists, divinity students, a lapsed Hindu, another gay Jew. I guess this is the closest thing to faith that I found, community. A place to call home, if only for now. Melanoma doesn't crawl, it jumps, the doctor said. Leblang means live long in German. Death by bad gummy, the ultimate bonehead move. You have to be vigilant. the surgeon told me. There are no guarantees here. How could I not be? I've been vigilant since 1962. I wear my history on my body. My left arm, like Bad Bad Leroy Brown, a jigsaw puzzle with a couple of pieces gone. So here I am, living with my questions and few answers, determined to make the most of the time I have left, however long or short that may be. Well, thank you so much. So usually when I do a show, I open it up for a few comments, questions, hopefully nothing too hateful. I will mention also, because I'm a writer and I'm a very slow writer, I wrote these two books. This one actually has a story. Actually, they both do mention my car accident on the first day of school, so I definitely started my educational career with a bang. But this one also has a lot of humor. There's some really short, funny pieces, and this is more of a poignant story, again, about my work in the deaf world, coming out, and just dealing with life and shit I didn't order from the catalog. And the books are 15 each, and you could send a writer to camp. I'll be happy to sign them. So they're over on the side. If you have any questions, see me. I also have cards with my website, so maybe I will just, yeah, if you would be interested, maybe, and you would pass. Thank you. Yeah.
One expression you used struck me as very beautiful. To find a home within myself kind of says a lot. But you've had more sorrows than most people in your life that you really had no control over. So it begs the question to me that I've always struggled with, is how much free will we really have. And I wonder if you could comment on that.
Wow, that's a big one. Wow. I guess my sense is, yeah, I think life is an interesting mix of like control and not control, and I think I'm not necessarily good at this. I think that going through early, childhood trauma, my go-to is to want to control life, but I've learned that mostly that doesn't work very well. I think that part of being human is trying to use our free will as much as we can and try to balance it with grace. I just watched a documentary, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but I just watched a documentary, and it was basically about various ways that people chose to die, like a green burial. And there was one of the people who was profiled in this was somebody who decided to die with dignity. He was an engineer. I don't know that he had a traditional faith in God, but he had, I believe, a type of cancer, and he set things up, and he had a chance to they had a party where he could see everybody, and he said goodbye to the family. And there was just, for me, it was so kind of heroic, because he was doing what he could do to die in a way where he maintained his dignity, and at the same time acknowledging that, obviously the illness, he had a beautiful relationship with his wife, and, it was hard to say goodbye, family, but he did it in a way where he was doing the best he can, I think, with the amount of free will that he had. So I think that's the balance, is, well, to fight, or to at least use what we have, you know what I mean? One of my friends said, well, you have a way of making lemonade from these things that happen. And I said, well, sometimes it's more like crushed lemons. I mean, it's like, I have a feeling that going through a lot of these things is partly what made me a writer. And I think it's also what makes me a good teacher. Because one of the things I do is I teach writing, this kind of writing with adults. One of the places I teach is at Grub Street in Boston, which is a nonprofit writing center. And I think going through these things and writing about them helps me meet other people where they are and help them tell their stories. So
you'll find your home.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. Anybody have any other questions, comments?
One thing I notice is that you didn't mention much about your deaf uncle. Maybe you could make a comment about that.
So in my previous show, I have a lot about that. I do a piece in my show about the connection I had. My uncle, so I have a very small family, and my only uncle was born deaf. And I didn't spend a lot of time with him. I didn't really know him that well. I don't think anyone really knew him that well as an adult. He was pretty isolated. He had been educated orally, so I never saw him use sign language. And I think that was a big part of why he had a heart attack at 44, because so much of who he was had been suppressed. But I felt this like deep connection with him, I think because growing up, I felt different. And he was different, and so I noticed him, and I didn't really know if he really felt anything for me until I worked on the book, and I talked to his only child, my cousin, who used to sign with her mother, because both my uncle and his wife were deaf, and then they split up when I was a kid. But my cousin told me that whenever we were going to my grandparents', my uncle would always say, my name, also I changed my name as an adult, my name was Bruce. And so he would always say, you know, is Bruce going to be there? And she said, he never asked about your brothers. And I said, why was that? And she said, because you noticed him. So he died when I was a senior in high school, and I actually studied deaf education in college. I worked with deaf people for about 15 years. So for me, this book is really about this idea of, I think actually, I couldn't have articulated it as a kid, but when I worked as a sign language interpreter in the late 90s. And one of the things I found is that the interpreters who work with deaf people, like at least half, it's mostly women, and about half the women are gay who work with deaf people. And then the men, there aren't many male interpreters, but almost all the men were also gay. And I think it's because, unlike any other group, if you're black, if you're Jewish, if you're Latino, the people around you are members of that group. If you grow up gay, if you grow up deaf, you have to find your community outside of your family, outside of the people around you. So there's this sense of otherness that it's like very different, and I think that's why. So I think I think that's why I felt so much connection with him. And so even though I didn't know him that well, I realized looking back when I started writing the book around the age of 50, and I also lost half my own hearing at that time suddenly, I realized that he'd had a huge influence on my life, even though I didn't get to spend that much time with him. And that's one of those weird things. Is that synchronicity? Is that planned? Is that fate? I don't know. But the book really came out of that. So I think it's kind of an unusual story, because there have been a number of books written by hearing children of deaf parents, but this was a much more like kind of a more distant relationship. And yet, again, I think it shows that idea that sometimes somebody can come in your life maybe for a short period of time, or you didn't get a chance to spend that much time with them, and yet they can still have a lot of impact.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So anyways, yeah.
You said that your uncle did not sign. What brought you to the point where you decided to learn to sign?
Well, I think just shortly before my uncle died, I was already thinking about wanting to be a teacher and thinking about deaf kids. And I went to visit some classes for the deaf, and I saw kids signing, and there was, in sign language, in ASL, it's this. I was just fascinated. And
know Tony Toledo?
I have met him, yeah. Yeah, he lives in this area, right?
Yes,
He's a
yes.
storyteller,
But
yeah.
in his own time.
Yeah, I mean, my uncle, I think, did know some sign language because my cousin told me her parents would go to the deaf club and he would do a combination of speaking and signing. But he had been taught that, you know, at that time in the 1940s and 50s, a lot of hearing educators especially would say, oh, well, sign language wasn't a real language, it's just a series of these gestures.
Tony's former wife was
I had met her
deaf.
too, yeah.
And, no, don't think she was born deaf, but at a very, very early age.
Right.
She became deaf. And she wrote and produced and acted in her own play, telling about how her parents suppressed her
Right.
desire to sign. And
Right.
subjected her to a hearing school, to
Yeah.
a speaking school. And it's very, very impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I saw my uncle, like, he was a whole person, but I mean, my grandparents meant well, and this was partly what they had been told by all the experts. They wanted to make him as normal as possible, but my uncle was, like, profoundly deaf, so his speech, like I could understand him, but yeah, people would have trouble understanding him, and, you know, he could have had a different life if he had been given sign language as a kid and everything, but yeah, so I was determined to learn it, and I still, you know, even though I'm rusty, I still love the language. It's very beautiful. Yeah.
So my life has been so very different from yours, but the way you express the stories of your life, there was so much that I could relate to. There were just so many things. So thank you for the way you communicate and the way you write. It's fabulous.
Well, thank you. I have a director who helped me. My director, Lyralyn, is here, and I want to thank them for all that helping. But yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, and when I work with other people on writing from their personal stories, I say that the idea is to use the specific to connect to something universal, because we all have the same emotions. And even though the specifics are different, I think if we write it, we can write it in a way that invites other people in. And then, you know, because I will go hear storytellers and read books by people whose life experience is a lot different than mine. But if they're well written, I usually find, yeah, but there's like loss or whatever, joy or risk. I mean, you know, there's always something I can relate to, you know. So thank you for saying that. That's what I'm trying to do, you know. So anyways, thank you so much. If you want to grab a book, please do. They're $15. I'll be happy to sign it. But anyways, thank you so much for coming. And grab a card if you can.